This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello and welcome to China Global Television Network. This is The World Today. I'm Beatrice Marshall in Nairobi. Here are your top stories. The World Health Organization asks countries to act fast as the Omicron variant spreads to more than 57 countries. Up to 1 million COVID-19 vaccine doses go to waste in Nigeria. Your top story this hour. The World Health Organization is pushing governments to reassess their national responses to tackle the Omicron variant. The new variant is quickly spreading around the world, with many worried about how effective current vaccines are against its mutations. The World Health Organization noted evidence from BioNTech and Pfizer on the effectiveness of their vaccine against Omicron. The World Health Organization scientists say it's too early to tell whether a reduction in neutralizing antibodies meant the vaccine was effective.
Even though we still need answers to some crucial questions, we're not defenseless against Omicron or Delta. The steps countries take today and in the coming days and weeks will determine how Omicron unfolds. If countries wait until their hospitals start to fill up, it's too late. Don't wait. Act now. We're running out of ways to say this, but we will keep saying it.
South African researchers say the Omicron variant makes Pfizer and BioNTech vaccines significantly less effective. A small preliminary study shows a 41-fold drop in the shot's ability to fight against the new strain compared with the original virus. The preliminary findings echo the drug maker's initial lab results. The companies also found a third jab boosts protection against Omicron remarkably, and the two-dose series may still be effective against a severe disease. We head to Nigeria, where Reuters is reporting that up to 1 million COVID-19 vaccines expired last month without being used. The expired doses were made by AstraZeneca and delivered from Europe. They reportedly arrived within 4 to 6 weeks of expiry and could not be used in time. The World Health Organization says fewer than 4% of Nigerian adults have been fully vaccinated. Vaccination rates are lagging across the African continent. The UK is tightening COVID restrictions as it faces a surge in Omicron cases. Prime Minister Boris Johnson confirmed that England is moving to what it calls Plan B measures. From Friday, face masks will be mandatory at most indoor venues. From next Monday, people will be advised to work from home. Additionally, vaccine passes will become mandatory for larger venues. While holiday parties and New Year celebrations around the world are getting shelved over fears of the fast-spreading Omicron variant, India, Brazil and Germany are the latest countries to cancel festivities. In the United States, COVID-19 hospitalizations are rising, mostly due to the Delta variant among the unvaccinated. Meanwhile, Pfizer has dropped key findings on the efficacy of its booster against Omicron. Sarah Walton reports from New York.
Hospitalizations from COVID-19 are increasing right across the United States, but it's being driven by 4 states in particular. In Michigan, there was an increase of 1,900 in the 7-day average number of hospital admissions between the 5th and the 7th of December. And there were sizable increases as well in Pennsylvania, Ohio and Indiana. So those 4 states together are responsible for nearly half the total increase in hospitalizations from COVID-19 right across the United States. Health experts are putting that down to people simply not being vaccinated against the virus. In Michigan, hospitals are saying that 90% of people in intensive care with COVID-19 have not had a single dose of the vaccine. The Omicron variant is continuing to cause concern. A study in South Africa suggests that the Pfizer vaccine provides less protection against the Omicron variants than it did with previously identified variants. But Pfizer themselves are revealing that their lab tests show that 3 shots of its vaccine does provide people with the same level of antibody protection against the Omicron variant as 2 shots did previously with other variants that have been identified. Pfizer now encouraging people to get a booster shot.
To be protected of Omicron, you really need a 3-dose series of vaccination, and that's how we should look at it right now. The 3-dose series is what you need. Everyone should get vaccinated, and those that have given the 2 doses should, as soon as possible, get the 3rd dose.
Sarah Walton, CGTN, New York.
China has approved the use of Brii Biosciences' neutralizing antibody cocktail for COVID-19. Brii said in October that the treatment showed a 78% reduction in hospitalization and death in patients in a phase 3 clinical trial. The medicine is approved to treat mild COVID cases at high risk of progressing to hospitalization or deaths in adults and minors aged 12 to 17. It is the first treatment of its type approved in the country. Olaf Scholz has become Germany's new chancellor, ending Angela Merkel's 16-year term. Scholz pledges his centre-left-led coalition will offer a new beginning for the country that is greener and fairer. He leads a 17-member cabinet made up of 9 men and 8 women. Newly appointed ministers attended the first cabinet meeting on Wednesday in Berlin. Green Party co-leader Robert Habeck is heading the newly created Ministry of Economic Affairs and Climate Action. Habeck also serves as vice-chancellor. The Greens' other co-leader, Annalena Baerbock, is Germany's first female foreign minister. Natalie Carney has more details.
A new era begins in Germany. Olaf Scholz, Angela Merkel's previous vice-chancellor and finance minister, was elected and sworn in as the country's new chancellor on Wednesday, leading the country's new centre-left government into a fresh political era. Scholz, a lawyer, entered politics at 19 years old and went on to head Germany's Social Democratic Party, as well as hold a number of ministerial roles. Despite accusations of corruption during his tenure as mayor of Hamburg, he was seen as Merkel's natural successor early on in the election campaign.
I think he has to fulfill big boots, and I think his biggest competition is to get the young people, because there are this change with the green ones and the environment and all this together. But I think that he will make it great.
I think Mr. Scholz will get it together. It's a good starting point already. I think experience teaches. And I have hope in Mr. Scholz that he will handle the COVID situation, because finally the vaccination obligations are coming. We will be secured.
Scholz's new government has already set up a COVID-19 crisis team charged with decreasing infection numbers and increasing vaccination rates. And the new parliament will soon vote on mandatory jabs for everyone starting in February. Germany's new government also aims to phase out coal by 2030 and ensure 80% of electricity comes from renewables. And social welfare programs will be improved, including promises to raise minimum wage, stabilize pensions, and build more affordable housing. Berlin's foreign policies will be values-based, and Scholz has already taken a stronger tone with Russia over their movement of troops along its border with Ukraine.
Yet Germany's new chancellor has a bumpy road ahead of him, thanks to the complexities of his coalition government, who have long held differing, if not at times opposing, views. As the head of state, Scholz must unite this coalition, but also show the leadership that is expected of the chancellor of Europe's largest economy.
The coalition plans for the next 4 years already show compromise, but can that last? Chancellor Scholz's own party, the Social Democrats, prioritizes social welfare, while the Greens vow to protect the environment and the Free Democrats want what's best for business. Yet many Germans are hopeful that these fresh dynamics will bring about the change that many have been yearning for. So after 16 years at the helm, Angela Merkel has officially handed over the keys to the chancellery to her successor, Olaf Scholz, to charter a new course for the country. And that job starts now. Natalie Carney, CGTN, in Munich.
The China space station crew have live-streamed a science class to school children across China. The lecture covered the construction of the space station and its in-orbit operations, with the taikonauts also conducting science experiments. This is the first lesson aboard the space station, but the first ever science lesson in space was streamed on board China's Shenzhou 10 spacecraft back in 2013. While China has slammed Canada's diplomatic boycott of the Beijing Winter Olympics, calling it political manipulation. In a statement, an embassy spokesperson said China has taken sides against fact, truth and the Olympic spirit. China has accused Ottawa of seeking to interfere in the Olympic Games based on ideological bias, rumors and lies. Canada announced on Wednesday it will not send any official to the Games over claims of human rights abuses. The Chinese embassy says no invitations had been extended to Canadian politicians. Canada is the latest country to boycott the Games, following the US, the UK and Australia. China has called this a political posturing and a smear campaign. The Chinese Foreign Ministry also responded to Australia's decision.
Australian officials were not on the invitation list, and no one will care whether they attend the event. Australian politicians' posturing is to satisfy their own interest. This will not impact the success of the event. It should be pointed out that Australia has linked the boycott with the so-called human rights issue in Xinjiang. In doing so, Australia is going against the principle of political neutrality in sport, set out in the Olympic Charter.
Australia is on alert over a wildfire in the country's southwest. The blaze is burning a large part of a famous national park in Western Australian state, about 300 kilometers south of Perth. Authorities have issued an emergency warning and some homes have been evacuated. Officials say warm and windy conditions were putting pressure on fire crews to extinguish the flames that have so far burnt over 1,000 hectares. And that is it for this edition of The World Today. I'll be back shortly with more news from the continent in Africa Live. Thank you for watching.
This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Welcome to Africa Live on CGTN with me, Beatrice Marshall, in Nairobi. Your top headline this hour: Libya's upper house is proposing a 2-month delay for the upcoming December election. The presidential and legislative polls are supposed to take place on the 24th of this month. The High Council of State said the delay looked to avoid threatening the country's political transition. The council has failed to reach an agreement on electoral laws with the House of Representatives, which is based in the country's east. The UN, however, is urging leaders to stick to the current timeline. Let's cross over to CGTN's Adel Mahuri. He's joining us now from Cairo. Adel, there have been calls for delaying the election in Libya. What more can you tell us about that?
Well, this is not a first of its kind call, and it has been 4 months, an initiative that the High Council of State, a legislative consultative body based in Tripoli and therefore supports the Western Bloc of Libya, has been trying to push for several months now. Basically, the initiative wants to set a clear and constitutional and legal foundation for the elections, and their claims, the High Council of State, is that if there is no solid legal foundation and constitutional foundation for the elections, the result of which can be easily appealed against, and therefore the entire election process could be in jeopardy if courts annul the results of these elections. So therefore, instead of holding it and the international pressure, of course, to hold it on the specified time on December 24, the High Council of State is recommending to push it to February. Now, February is a date that has been already part of the UN agreed, or at least the general agreement of the election process, as it would have been the next round, the runoff for the presidential election, along with the parliament election. So instead, now the Western Bloc is saying, why not hold everything together when there is a legal foundation clear that can guide the elections?
Adel, so how exactly are the other political players reacting to this move, and what happens next?
Well, the Eastern Bloc definitely has been the one resisting this delay for a long time. And from the perspective of the Eastern Bloc, the politicians, the Eastern Parliament, and those who support the Libyan National Army, they believe that it is an attempt from the Western political powers to delay the vote so that they can gain more political ground and therefore more or less guarantee how the results will go. That's the claim from the Eastern side. So Libya appears to be divided in terms of when to hold the elections, even until this moment.
Adel Mahroui joining us there from Cairo with our update on Libya. Well, at least 7 Togolese peacekeepers have been killed in an explosion in central Mali. The United Nations says 3 others were seriously wounded by the blast. The incident happened when their convoy was hit by a roadside bomb while traveling between the towns of Douenza and Savare on Wednesday. Groups linked to Al-Qaeda and ISIL operate in the region. No group has claimed responsibility. The UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has strongly condemned the attack.
The Secretary General strongly condemns this heinous attack. We offer our sincere condolences to the families of the victims, as well as the government and people of Togo. We wish a speedy recovery to all those who were injured. The Secretary General also calls on the Malian authorities to spare no efforts in identifying the perpetrators of the attack so they can be brought to justice.
Burkina Faso's President Roch Kabore has fired his Prime Minister Christophe Dabire. The move comes as the country faces an escalating security crisis that has killed thousands and led to street protests calling for Dabire's ouster. Burkina Faso has been prone to attacks carried out by groups linked to Al-Qaeda and the Islamic State since 2016. Many civilians have been killed in the attacks, and over 1 million people have been forced to flee from their homes. The West African nation is at the heart of an Islamist insurgency that has also hit large parts of neighboring Mali and Niger. Well, South African researchers say the Omicron variant makes Pfizer and BioNTech vaccine significantly less effective. A small preliminary study shows a 41-fold drop in the shot's ability to fight against the new strain compared with the original virus. The preliminary findings echo the drug maker's initial lab results. The company has also found a third jab boosts protection against Omicron remarkably, and the 2-dose series may still be effective against a severe disease. Well, South Africa on Wednesday reported nearly 20,000 new COVID-19 cases and 36 new COVID-related deaths. This is a record since the new Omicron variant wave began. It is not clear how many of the infections were from the Omicron variant, as only a fraction of the samples are sequenced. According to statistics from the National Institute for Communicable Diseases, the confirmed number of cases in South Africa stands at 3,071,000. Over 90,000 deaths have been linked to the disease since the pandemic started. Let's get further insights on this now from CGTN's Angelo Coppola. He's in Johannesburg for us. Angelo, the Omicron variant has been reported to be highly transmissible. Has the current surge been linked to the variant?
Beatrice, we're waiting for definitive evidence that Omicron is in fact the main driver of those infection rates. There are, however, some clues pointing in that direction. Evidence from at least one South African hospital group is pointing to the fact that fewer people are being hospitalized. In the epicenter in Gauteng, there were some 11,703 new infections reported overnight. And that's out of a total national, as you mentioned, of 19,842. And the infection rate there is a staggering 26.8%. But the Netcare Hospital Group CEO Richard Friedland says that hospital occupancy for COVID patients is currently around 400. And that's compared to over 2,000 patients for each of the last 3 waves that we've had in the country. The symptoms of those hospitalized are also a lot milder, and there's no ventilators or oxygen that's being currently deployed. In terms of evidence, we do have to wait until next week, in fact, or so, until the scientists in the country release their official research findings. Beatrice.
So, Angelo, it does seem that South Africa is in its 4th wave. What measures are authorities taking this time around to control it?
Well, look, the president is back from his 4-nation West African state visits. He got back on Tuesday. So cabinet met yesterday to discuss issues of state, including, of course, the state's response to the pandemic. We don't have a date, for example, for the next National COVID Command Council meeting. That's the group that advises the president about the science and the approaches that need to be taken. There also, more importantly, wasn't a date for a presidential address announced or set. So what we do know is that the Medical Research Council in the country is monitoring those clinical manifestations of the infections. And according to Cabinet, there are no red flags just yet. Providing evidence from yesterday's cabinet meeting, the minister in the presidency, Mondi Gungubele, says that vaccinations are still the key means of dealing with the pandemic. Cabinet says they do understand the damage caused in hard lockdowns, with thousands of businesses that were closed over the last 18 months. Unemployment has also spiked, and that's also an issue. So the attitude is to find the best way of navigating the virus and keeping the economy going. So we don't expect any knee-jerk reactions from Cabinet or from the National Command Council. Beatrice.
All right, Angelo Coppola for us there in Johannesburg. Thank you. And in Nigeria, health authorities are warning that vaccine hesitancy is hampering progress in the country's ongoing vaccination program. This threatens to reverse the gains made in the nation's fight against the COVID-19 pandemic. And as CGTN's Deji Bademosi reports from Lagos, the uptake of vaccines remains low despite efforts by the government to take inoculation centers closer to the public.
It's quite unusual in Nigeria to have a vaccination point under a bridge and a very busy commercial area like this. But health authorities in the country are adopting every method they could to ramp up COVID-19 vaccinations and help stop the spread of the virus. The only snag is that people are not turning out in droves to take the jab. Less than 4% of the population of the country has been fully vaccinated, making the government's push to hit its 70% vaccination target by next year an uphill task.
The vaccine uptake now is very, very low. It's very, very low. It's not as a result of shortage of vaccines. It's vaccine hesitancy. Right now we have we've received over 32 million doses. We're expecting about 41 million. By the end of December, we'll have about 71 million doses of vaccines. What percentage of that have we utilized? All 6 million. 3-point-something million double vaccinated. That is not sufficient for us to be able to niche towards herd immunity.
Last month, the government launched a nationwide mass COVID-19 vaccination exercise. Despite the initiative, vaccine hesitancy still persists. It's largely fueled by conspiracy theories, misinformation, and unfounded fear.
I wish I can take the vaccine, but with the story I'm hearing, I don't know. But I need it. As a mother, I don't really believe there is COVID in this country, so that is it.
The government recently imposed a vaccine mandate on all federal government workers in the country. They are now required to either show a negative PCR test result or evidence of COVID-19 vaccination before they're allowed into their offices. Vaccination sites have also been set up close to government offices as well.
We have to continue to try and educate all Nigerians about not only COVID-19 as a disease, but also the fact that we have these vaccines that are available. This is why we're engaging with traditional leaders, with religious leaders, so that we can use these channels to communicate.
Nigeria has so far recorded 6 cases of the Omicron variant of COVID-19. Officials are therefore racing against time to ensure that more people get vaccinated to stop the variant from spreading. The country also faces another challenge, the shelf life of some of the vaccines. There are reports that huge amounts of vaccines have expired without being used, and the low vaccination rate has been blamed for that. Government officials hope that increased public sensitization on the need for vaccines will help reduce hesitancy and boost inoculation numbers in the long run. Deji Bademasi, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
You're watching Africa Live, still ahead on the program. The U.S. plans to hold its summit on democracy, but what are its goals? And Sudan's top general Abdel Fattah al-Burhan warns against foreign interference in the country's internal affairs. The U.S. is set to hold its summit for democracy this week, saying it looks to tackle threats to democracies worldwide. CGTN's Dong Shue spoke about the summit's purpose with the Shen Yi, Associate Professor of International Politics at Fudan University in Shanghai.
The invitations are out for the U.S. President Joe Biden's so-called Summit for Democracy. China's Taiwan region joins other invitees, including the UK and Japan, with the goal of rallying like-minded countries around efforts to fight corruption and advance human rights. This online gathering is the fulfillment of a promise Biden made during his presidential campaign last year. But with a Pew Research report published in November showing that 72% of Americans feel that U.S. democracy used to be a good example, but is not anymore. The U.S. has long considered itself a beacon of democracy, claiming that all Americans enjoy the right to participate in public affairs, vote, and hold the government accountable. But does it really work that way in the U.S.? According to noted statesman and former Singaporean Prime Minister Lee Kuan Yew, the ultimate test of a political system is whether it improves the standard of living for the majority of people. So one must ask, does the U.S. system ensure people's welfare? With almost 800,000 American lives lost due to the COVID-19 pandemic and nearly 7 million people unemployed, it doesn't seem to be the case. So why is the U.S. holding the Summit for Democracy, and is it in a position to do so?
There are two reasons. The U.S. feels embarrassed by the impact and challenges brought about by China's rise. It wants to create a camp to contain China. Also, Biden's predecessor Trump did certain things to knock off the halo the US placed on itself since 1945 or even earlier. Biden wants to restore it. The attack on Capitol Hill this January showed the world America's internal divide. We see this in ethnic conflicts everywhere, the huge gap between the rich and the poor, and its handling of the pandemic.
Identifying the participants for such a major diplomatic gathering is a complicated process. So what considerations were at play?
A summit of 110 participants is not inclusive, although the summit is a plus for Biden in domestic politics. It invited Taiwan, which is not even an independent sovereign country, in order to make China feel bad. This so-called summit is not suitable for chasing a strategic goal, but Biden wants to use it to create different camps. It is a standard Cold War tactic.
Professor Shen believes that with the irreversible trend of globalization and China's huge economic advances, the U.S. is losing its erstwhile position as the only global leader, and such political moves like inviting Taiwan and excluding China are stemming from that sense of failure. China is not invited, but its Taiwan region is. Shortly after a summit between the Chinese and U.S. presidents, it can be seen as a proactive move, but at what cost?
The U.S. failed to keep its promise. Biden wants to demonstrate his harsh position on China for domestic interests. The summit will end up looking like a photo op, absolutely meaningless.
So some commentators have argued over the years that despite its economic growth, China would always be held back by a lack of democracy, as the term is defined in the West. Do you agree?
They say China has no democracy. The fact is that China doesn't have the same political system as that in the West. It's a case where they claim to have democracy and say, if you aren't like me, you are not democratic.
And we continue with our exclusive interview with Ethiopia's Minister of Finance, Eyob Takalin. Speaking to CGTN's Girum Chala, he commented on what he called the unwavering support of China. Takalin praised China for allowing Ethiopia to handle its own internal affairs.
Well, not all powerful partners of Ethiopia were following one-size-fits-all kind of attitude towards the ongoing situation in the country. Partners of Ethiopia, like China, are saying, following the non-interference policy, supporting the Ethiopian economy, President Xi Jinping promising to provide a platform, not only for Ethiopia, but for the entire continent, that could perhaps replace or match the AGOA, the U.S. tax-free kind of opportunity for African states, out of which Ethiopia was excluded. Now, how do you really see the Chinese continued support for Ethiopia?
The Chinese support has not just been consistent all along, but I think the principled stand that China has taken, the unwavering support that they have demonstrated to the Ethiopian public by, first of all, leaving Ethiopia's internal affairs to Ethiopians themselves, encouraging us to sort it out ourselves, but providing the most needed economic, trade and diplomatic support. We are forever grateful for partners like China. And I can imagine we are just beginning this cooperation. I think the sky is the limit. In different areas, the partnership between Ethiopia and China will continue. What the last FOCAC forum in Dakar has shown, and the commitment of China for Africa's prosperity. So we are really grateful, and we know this strong and solid partnership would even be strengthened further in the decades ahead.
Doctor, in Ethiopia, a few months back, we've seen the formation of a new government out of an election. Those, such as the African Union, have 100% endorsed for its fairness and other things. But then again, there are others who stand against it. Do you think there is a democratic attitude or a democracy in general terms that should be applicable for each and every state in the world?
Well, I come from a Gada tradition, I think the political and moral power of citizens need to be respected. And I think if this is documented properly, Ethiopia has shown the world that there are different ways of respecting the political and moral power of citizens through our traditional system. So that needs to be encouraged. A government that works for its people is very, very important. But what is disappointing is the hypocrisy about democracy in general. As I said earlier on, it's so disappointing to see the West not rallying behind an nascent democracy like Ethiopia's, not supporting this prime minister who really has nothing but a very healthy vision for his people and for the region at large. So that, I think, makes you question where people stand. But we as Ethiopians, we understand the importance of elected our own leaders, rallying behind them, and also not succumbing to anyone's holiness act. Our people gave us the mandate, and we only listen to that mandate, and we will take Ethiopians to peace, prosperity, and development, because that is what they aspire. And for all Ethiopians, I think we'll find a way of creating a strong nation that works for all. And that is only a responsibility of Ethiopians by themselves. So a government for Ethiopians, by Ethiopians, to Ethiopians. That's how we say it.
Sudan's top general Abdel Fattah al-Burhan has warned against any foreign interference in the country's internal affairs. Burhan made the remarks during a speech after the conclusion of a military exercise in the Makil area in the northern Nile River state. General Burhan says he has noticed suspicious movements of ambassadors and diplomats who he believes are working to incite the Sudanese people. CGTN's Wilkista Nyabwa reports.
Sudan's military has just concluded its training. General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan says the just concluded military training is also a routine measure to prepare for a possible war in the future, stressing that it does not target a specific party.
Everyone should know that this training, which we have seen now, is a mini training, analogous to a possible battle in the future. There are no intentions to target any party, and it is a routine training. The armed forces used to train every year and summarize the training at the end of each year by holding such exercises.
The general also says his country has begun a new phase and has been liberated from all restrictions. Burhan also mentioned that the armed forces will offer unlimited support to Sudanese Prime Minister Abdallah Hamdok.
Now that we are liberated from all the restrictions that had shackled us, which made us not work, and also shackled the Prime Minister in the previous period and made him not work, we say to our brother Hamdok, go ahead and we are with you, and we will support you until we cross the Sudan, as you mentioned, until the end of a transitional period acceptable to all. We then agreed to establish a system of government that the Sudanese people have accepted and elected.
Experts say the step affirms Sudan's readiness for war in the future.
Any military exercise, and this is an annual exercise in which all the armed forces apparatus are integrated and they work in what is known as the tactical exercise, has implications. First, the process of gaining experience for skills to deal with wars, and second, the strategic direction of the exercise venue in the areas in northern Sudan. It is also a very important strategic direction because the nature of the region is similar to some areas in different parts of Sudan.
General al-Burhan also stressed that the military is ready to steer the country towards democratic elections in 2023. Wilkes Anyabo, CGTN.
Time now to take a look at your business news. Here's what's ahead. IMF Chief Kristalina Georgieva hails the Democratic Republic of Congo's economic reforms.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
The head of the IMF has called the DRC a rare bright spot in Africa's economic performance. Kristalina Georgieva added this was due to high commodity prices and government reforms. The country is the top African producer of copper, as well as the world's leading miner of cobalt. Among the reforms enacted by President Felix Tshisekedi's administration are greater independence of the central bank and improved revenue collection. The Tanzanian government has called for more concerted action to combat global warming to protect Mount Kilimanjaro's glaciers. This comes as the Tanzania National Parks Authority has organized a 300-person trip to summit Mount Kilimanjaro to mark 60 years of the country's independence. On Thursday, CGTN's Daniel Kejo has more.
It's the highest single freestanding mountain in the world, and it forms a centerpiece of many trips to Tanzania.
A holiday in Tanzania is not complete. If you're able to achieve it, then it's not complete without climbing Kilimanjaro. Now, others climb it for the sheer objective of, yes, I've done this. And for other people, especially the adventure seekers, this is something that they've been planning for many years.
Experts estimate that Mount Kilimanjaro has lost about 80% of its glacial ice. A World Meteorological Organization report suggests that glaciers on top of Mount Kilimanjaro, as well as other African mountains, are melting and could disappear by 2040. This could impact the livelihoods of more than 1 million Tanzanians who depend on the mountain for survival. Being a UNESCO World Heritage Site, the Tanzanian government says more work needs to be done to protect the mountain.
And we should sensitize the world to play its part to reduce the impact of climate change so that Mount Kilimanjaro is back to where it is. We believe we are going to be there.
The Kilimanjaro National Park Authority has been tasked with protecting the mountain as a tourist destination. It usually attracts 60,000 climbers each year.
We have been undertaking some restoration programs, and through these restoration programs we have been planting indigenous trees. So in case the area is degraded, maybe due to human activities or maybe due to fire, we usually plant indigenous trees in order to accelerate the forest recovery and the overall succession process.
People who work in tourism hope that as climbers hit the summit on the Day of Independence, it will highlight the need for more action, and that efforts will increase to protect the mountain's glaciers from melting further. They believe that will conserve the flora and fauna that covers the mountain and the livelihood of the millions that depend on it. Daniel Kijo, CGTN, Moshi, Tanzania.
I&M Group has officially launched its rebranded operations in Uganda. This comes after the company successfully acquired 90% shareholding in Uganda's Orient Bank Limited earlier this year. This is part of the company's broader strategy to expand its business by increasing its geographical footprint across the Eastern African region. While Egypt's non-oil commodity exports rose by 40% in the first 9 months of the year to a record $29.7 billion. That's compared to $21.2 billion in the same period recorded in 2020. CGTN's Yasser Hakim reports on the measures Egypt is taking to boost its exports.
These numbers show a strong rebound after the fallout caused by the coronavirus pandemic. It is partly owed to the recovery in international trade and the strong infrastructure being established by the state to ease export of goods.
The country has taken big strides in this domain with the new laws, regulations and facilities for exporters, and by upgrading various forms of transport and logistics. For example, upgrading roads, developing and modernizing the existing ports, and building new ports. The fast overhaul of ports, of shipping and uploading cargo and export services. This was all done in the best quality recently by the state.
The government has also supported the industries amidst the pandemic, with emergency funds as well as waiving on taxes or debts and cutting on energy bills. This helped sustain production and increase exports. Amongst the fastest growing commodities during the first 9 months of 2021 were mineral oils, all forms of plastics, electrical appliances and furniture. Agricultural products remain a top exporter too. Exports have hit $30 billion, up from $21 billion year on year, but the government says it's targeting much more.
The plan by the state had been for exports to increase from $25 billion, which has risen to $29 billion the last few days, and to reach the target of $100 billion. We are going ahead through Goso Company, which we established to set up in 16 countries worldwide. We will begin in China in January. The licenses have been issued to start there. We will also have 7 centers in Africa, as well as in North and South America, 3 offices in Europe, and 1 in India, Malaysia, and Dubai.
But these plans could be hit by a couple of hiccups.
The main challenge to export now is the supply chain disruption. The biggest issue is the lack of containers, therefore the sharp rise in freight and container costs. Egypt cannot solve this crisis because it's a global issue. I think 2022 will give us a clearer idea about this problem and the impact of the new virus variant, so we can determine how to solve this crisis.
In spite of the challenges, officials believe, just like the North African nation had the ability to rebound from the COVID-19 downturn, it will be able to achieve the ambitious $100 billion exports, up from the current $30 billion in 5 years. Yasser Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
December 11th marks 20 years since China became a member of the World Trade Organization. Dai Kaiyi visited a major domestic home appliance producer in Sichuan to see how it has benefited from this membership.
This is Changhong's factory in China's southwestern city of Mianyang. The home appliance producer is a successful outcome of China's opening up policy.
So agrees.
In December 2001, China became a member of the World Trade Organization, embracing trade and investment from all over the world.
When China joined the World Trade Organization 20 years ago, this home appliance producer knew it'd bring challenges as competition would get tougher, but it also created opportunities to take their game to the next level.
Be it challenges or opportunities, it provided strong incentives to Changhong. As early as 2004, we made the going out strategy on products, talents, capitals, and brands. To us, China joining the WTO means wider market access on a global scale and a chance to build a world-class manufacturing and R&D platform.
From January to September this year, Changhong's overseas sales revenue rose by 16%. The company says in the last 2 decades, as the manufacturing and processing industries expanded in China, the country has become a heavyweight in home appliance production. Companies like Changhong took advantage of the trend, finding room to cooperate with international partners. As a result, it expanded its market share overseas, covering 130 countries and regions, and its partners in return reap the same benefits in China.
Technique innovation is an essential element behind the current progress we achieved. Beyond the 8 R&D bases in China, we have some in countries including the US, the Czech Republic, and Spain. It allows us to customize based on customer demand. With the help of the WTO, we can make full use of the best talents and technology from around the world.
Europe is one of the most important overseas markets for Changhong, and transporting the products there requires efficiency. Some of the cargoes behind me will be shipped away shortly.
Before the launch of the China-Europe Railway Express, all of Changhong's exports relied on waterborne transport. But it was not ideal for the company, based in China's inland areas. So these freight trains that go all the way to the European continent open up new possibilities.
Previously, we had no options but to set up redistribution centers in coastal cities in Europe, and to operate like that is expensive and not flexible. So after the China-Europe Railway Express launched, we can build centers at multiple stops along the way and cover much wider markets.
Changhong's originality helped it tap into global markets, and with new opportunities popping up along the way, the company hopes to enhance its status. 戴凯毅 CGTN 绵阳 Sichuan Province.
Well, let's now take a look at your sports news. Here's what's ahead. Cameroon finalizes preparations with a month to go to the Africa Cup of Nations.
How would you create your legend? On the fields, on the tracks, in the arenas of Africa. Were you born to be a player? Could this moment be yours? Sports Scene. Find your game.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Cameroon will host the Africa Cup of Nations, scheduled to take place from the 9th of January to the 6th of February 2022. The country was awarded next year's edition after failing to be ready in time to host the 2019 edition. CGTN's Mohamed Abubakar takes a look at the status of Cameroonian stadia and other infrastructure ahead of the tournament next month.
The 2021 Africa Cup of Nations next month will be held across 5 cities, with 7 stadiums expected to be ready in time to host the 24-team showpiece. The annexed pitches of the various stadiums will serve as training grounds, with renovation works on some nearing completion.
We are in the Olembe Sports Stadium, a futuristic sports complex, because it is a complex that has several structures inside. You have the stadium itself and its various components, the playing area, the VIP area, a presidential stand with 34 lodges, 4 changing rooms, and we also have the infirmary areas, the indoor warm-up rooms, and of course the spectator stand with 60,000 seats. Still within the main stadium, you have a 4-star hotel that is being built and structured on the northern side. There is no need to present the work any further, because at this stage it speaks for itself.
The media that eagerly awaits this continental tournament will also have convenient working space at the complex.
We are in the press room of the Japoma Stadium. My first impression is that the room is spacious. There is enough space and all computers are connected to the internet. This will allow us to work well. We also have plasma screens that will allow us to follow the game live in case we are not in the stadium. We also have photocopiers here. The setting is pleasant and will allow all journalists to do their work well.
Hotel projects have also flourished in the cities that will host the AFCON matches. Nearly 40 of these hotels will be made available to the various teams and their delegations throughout the tournament.
The hotels are ready. We have organized ourselves to be able to welcome the 23 countries at the Games. We have agreed on the type of product we want to offer. We have packages that encourage not only Cameroonians, but also the 23 other nations that arrive to visit Cameroon. This is for us a high-impact operation that will boost tourism.
Cameroon will look to make amends for their failure to prepare well in 2019 and hope that the competition next month will leave a positive and lasting legacy to the rest of the continent. Mohamed Abubakar, CGTN.
The International Olympic Committee chief has welcomed the support of governments for their national Olympic teams ahead of the Beijing 2022 Winter Olympics, despite some countries announcing a diplomatic boycott of the Games. The IOC chief says the competition has always been about athletes and not politics.
The integrity of the Games are about the integrity of the sports competitions. And therefore, we have our full focus, on the athletes. The Games are about and for the athletes, and therefore you will hear the same comment from us for every political decision from any government. We have been concerned with the athletes. We welcome that they can participate, that they are supported by their national governments, and the rest is politics, and our political neutrality, the principle is applied.
Barcelona crashed out of